Welcome to the Penguin Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tate. Joining me, as always, my good buddy and co-host, Nick Locapo, and our third host, Archie.
Yeah, he just jumped up here. Yeah.
What's going on, Archie?
He just got a huge haircut because he had too many knots. So he's a little shaved down right now, but he's doing good. We could all use a good shave.
We could all use a good shave every now and then.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm closer and closer to taking the top hair off. I'm thinking,
hair.
Yeah, I'm thinking just like, whoop, just all the way. Just pulling a full-on Ben Train.
Yeah, that would make you trim the beard up a lot more often too, right?
Oh yeah, well, because I'd be able to focus on it. I'd have less. Yeah. I'd be able to. I wouldn't have
too much more of a spotlight on the beard if you do that. So yeah.
No, I got Rocco and Bellatrix are here, but they're downstairs. We have them under blankets since they're Chihuahuas. So I'm not sure if they're going to join. And this might not be a dog podcast today.
No, I wasn't anticipating it, but yeah, it's just there. There he was. He was just down there. So now he's here. Anyway. Well,
Nick, it's spooky season, man.
It's haunted key season.
Yeah,
yeah.
Agatha's haunted key just dropped.
Who's Agatha? Anyway,
it was her all along.
I know. No. Yeah, haunted key's great. Haunted key's great. We just put out a haunted key here at Penguin. And man, where do I begin? So haunted key is a trick that you can get on Penguin right now. And it is a big skeleton key that you can place in your hand and make it move on your command. So it essentially just rolls over. But it's really, the haunted key as an effect is it's kind of like it's a really interesting one in Magic. Don't you think? Like,
yeah, because it's it's one of those that when you find out the method, you're like, oh, this is real magic. It's but it also requires a degree of control that takes a while to get used to. I remember the first time when I learned haunted key for the first time, learning how to just make it move forward, but then how to control it so that it didn't just flop over and make people think, oh, you moved your hand, was wild. And then the fun part is doing it in somebody else's hand.
Sure. Yeah, because it gets like a weird rap sometimes with magicians who just like, it is funny, right? If you put a haunted key in your hand and wow, it rolls over. Wow, the circular key in the palm of your hand rolled over. But if you do it incredibly slow, it becomes there is an element of mystery to it, and it's a strong element. And to your point, the method behind it is real. It falls in the same category as like Ouija board, and pendulum and things, where really this is something like Richard Osterland taught to me. Like the reason why Richard chooses to do the haunted key is because it is a real method. Like if you want to portray the idea that you have real power, you should choose tricks that have like a real method behind it. So there is no method, but using the like idiomotor response in your hand, if you focus on the key turning over, the key will turn over. The key to it all will be doing it slow. And, the haunted key does lend itself to a nice framing, storytelling aspect that if you're in the right company and want to convey something that might be a little bit eerie or spooky, the haunted key lends itself very nicely to that. But it doesn't have to be. It can be the key to somebody's heart or key to treasure or something. But there's a lot of symbols that you can relate the key to, which is very fun. And so the key that you get is great. It's heavy.
It's the Cadillac of haunted keys.
Yeah. And what I like, there's a couple things that I think are a little nuanced about it that I like. One, it's heavy and it's like perfectly balanced and it's designed to just like roll like really slowly in your hand. The other thing is that it's not antique, so it's not like pigeonholing you in some sort of like haunted presentation, which is not where I come from. And then the other thing about it is also not bright and shiny, right? It's kind of like this just dull gray. Doesn't look brand new, doesn't look old. It's just kind of an object. So I love it. Love it. It's been a fun thing to carry around for a while here for haunted key season.
It's really fun. I do like the design of this one compared to others. I think I've had multiple haunted keys over the year. I feel like when I was an early customer at Penguin, long before you or I were ever even considered to be shoved in front of a camera by the
Mm,
great giant iceberg that we work for, I had a haunted key that I remember, like, the teeth moved and you did some other stuff with it, and it was
yeah.
like it was okay, but it was really shiny, and
Yeah.
then like the teeth moving kind of like made the rolling like less powerful. And that rolling, I mean, you can really dial that in and get it so that it's eerie the way it
Yeah.
moves and very convincing. And I think that this one is just fantastic.
You can also get it to roll backwards,
Yeah.
like roll, which, yeah. So we cover it all in the instructional video. I mean, it's a pretty simple trick, but I think for the right performer, it's a really excellent trick.
Speaking of excellent tricks for the right performer, we had Spirit Coffin by Nathan Kranzo just dropped, which is this one's super fun. So if you've ever played with spirit slates, this is sort of an interesting take on the spirit slates. If you don't know what the spirit slates are, you'd have two blank chalkboards. You put them together, put a piece of chalk between them, summon the spirits from the great beyond. And then when you separated the chalkboard, the chalk had moved around and written messages. And there's a few things that are interesting about that is that, like, if you actually put two slates together, there wouldn't really be room for the chalk to move around. So this sort of like makes it feel like the chalk is sort of whizzing around inside of the coffin. And then it's more self-contained. Like, it's just a thing that you can open and close and put the chalk in. But also, because it's a box, it's a coffin, but it's a box, there's other ways to present it. Like, Kranzo's got this really fun presentation where he's got all these chalk letters all over the inside, and then he closes it, puts a tissue inside, then summons the spirits, and they erase all of the chalk except for the letters that do the reveal, which is it's an interesting way to go the other direction rather than the chalk moving around, because it conjures up these images of something just whizzing around inside the box all of your own accord. And because it sort of lives in that same world as the old card box gimmick, where you could like make a card change or disappear or restore, you can do some additional things with it as well. But it's also big enough that you can carry props around in, so it can be sort of a
Yeah,
set
sure.
piece as well, which is nice.
Yeah, I didn't really think about that. You can carry it around. You can put your haunted key in it, and
Yeah, have a whole haunted thing.
yeah, you can do the whole thing for the holiday season. Yeah, it's great. Um, I love the demo. I haven't seen one in person yet, but
Mhm.
why not? Be a more fun object to carry around than a couple slates at
Yeah.
this point. I'm excited to get my hands on one and give it a shot.
I think you'll have some fun with it. It's they were all done. They all went through our warehouse, or not our warehouse, our workshop, and they made sure that they all work. There's a magnetic flap involved, so you can open it, show everything empty, and when you close it, you can handle it pretty freely, because the secret that moves around to make the writing appear or change or whatnot ends up being magnetized somewhere. And so you have a
Oh,
really way of you have a great way of handling it very freely once it's done.
yeah, that sounds great. I mean, like
Yeah.
that old card case, I've always thought is still incredibly good.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's not like a great one to buy, and I don't even know if should be one to buy. It's like I've always tried to pigeonhole it in something into my act, like some other object, you know, because it would be hard to fit. But I've
Mhm.
always loved that method of the thing. I think it's
Yeah.
really powerful.
I like that the people on YouTube are getting a much better idea of what we're saying because they can see as we gesture. But the audio listeners are like, "What thing?
Yeah,
What
the
thing?
the thing, the
The
thing.
thing?"
Yeah.
Um, there's one other key related thing came out this week, which is I'm really excited about this. This is Karate Key by Craig Petty and Seth Race.
Mm.
This is the classic karate coin gimmick, but it's built into the same keys that come with Keymaster. So brass
Mm.
key, put your finger through it, and then the hole expands, and it's sort of your finger can melt through it. And Craig's got a really nice handling where he does it on a spectator's hand. But I've been carrying this around at the restaurant for a while. It's the reason I bought my main Keymaster set, was because I was waiting for this to come out so I could use it as sort of the final effect with these moving holes. But
Mm.
it's great. Don't overthink it and don't overlook it. Don't the and the best way to do this is the actual, like, the original David Roth method, where your finger melts through, not the thing where you like throw it in the air and
And stab it,
stab
yeah.
your finger through it. Like, I get people like that. It's an easier way to do it, but this is a really strong piece of magic, and the visuals on it
Yeah.
are great, because when you actually melt your finger through it, because you can hold the stem of the key, the visual of your finger moving around, like melting through the brass, is really trippy.
Yeah, that slow motion finger, like, kinda pushing through the key
Hmm.
is definitely the way to go with it. Um, it's just such a superior visual to the karate one. When did
Hmm.
that become popular? I'm not sure, but
S-
anyway.
So I had to do some research for this routine, and it was Richard Kaufman's Coin Magic book, was where Karate Coin by David Roth was originally published, and he publishes both versions.
Yeah,
So
so did Roth have it, like, throw it up in the air and, like, stab with the finger?
yes,
Oh,
yes, that is Roth's, but it is Roth's second handling. It's
got
not
it.
the first handling is the finger melting through, but everyone forgot about that one.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Because, like,
Yeah.
I first saw the stab one before I ever saw the finger melting through. I think I
Oh,
only
yeah.
even saw the finger melting through, like, in the last 5 to 7 years or so,
Yeah.
but
And
it's certainly better.
it was sort of like when, I think it was when Eric Jones started doing aperture, when he started
Mm.
doing the handling with the Chinese coin, so it almost like made the hole larger.
It's interesting to think this key stem is, like,
Mhm.
almost,
It makes it better.
helps yeah, it almost helps frame the moment a little bit, like,
It
because you can
really
hold
does.
it, yeah, as opposed to a coin where your finger
Yeah.
has to be, like, on the edge of the coin or something. Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
It's some great tricks this week, and we have some more great stuff coming out later this week. There's a new Penguin Live that's going to drop. There's some new SpongeBall stuff that's going to drop, but we can talk about that next week.
Mm.
When we're on the other side of it. I am very interested to hear about what's going on over at the Hand in the Eye. You can finally give us some
Oh.
updates.
Oh, well, there was some as the first renders were released of some of the spaces inside the Hand in the Eye. We did, there was a great write-up done in Gallery magazine, which was focused mainly on some of the design work that the Rockwell Group is doing inside of the old mansion down here on 100 East Ontario.
Can we just for a second stand back and say that the fact that you guys have the Rockwell Group working on this is huge. I mean, they're a legendary design firm.
They are. They are, and it is such an impressive team of people that we get to work with. And the level of detail and thoughtfulness and execution that they're
Hmm.
putting into this is, I mean, I don't know what I expected, but I'm always shocked at what's happening inside the building. And these are all things that I've been looking at for years at this point.
Hmm.
So it was weird to see in the gallery magazine. It was like a bookmark in time. It was like this whole years I've been looking at these images. Nobody had seen them, and then that magazine article dropped, and now people have seen them. you know,
Yeah.
and it's only, I think it was 4 images in the magazine.
Hmm.
It's four of, I don't even know, 50
Yeah.
that I'm sure will come out over time. But they were, it was nice to be able to share some of that with
Yeah.
people.
Well, people should really look this up. I know that the images have been released on the Hand in the Eye's Instagram page.
Yep.
They were in the story. I know they've been on your stories. And I mean, I gotta say, my ex was an interior designer for a commercial architecture firm, and so renders like this that get released, A, you don't see them very often, which is really neat. But B, these kinds of things are usually pretty accurate. So I mean,
There,
we're seeing really really close images to what it's going to look like.
it everything that I've seen
Mm-hmm.
is these are exactly what is going in the space. Maybe not so much
Mm-hmm.
like the art on the wall,
Yeah.
but there will be art in that spot. Just exactly whatever's in the render might not be the same,
Mm-hmm.
but down to the furniture as well. Everything's custom. So it's everything is museum quality, custom. It's really really spectacular what's happening in there. Um, I guess we could talk about just a couple of the images. One in particular
Yeah.
is the one with the staircase.
Yeah.
Um, this is previously so one of the historic McCormick mansions here in Chicago, which was an old family home that maybe we could dive into for a
Mm-hmm.
topic another day or something. But
Yeah.
that staircase is original to the building. So we are maintaining that staircase. It's one of the few things, along with I think the gas lamps on the outside are also staying the same. Those just got sent out for getting refurbished. I think we're trying to get actual flame in the gas lamps that would be outside of the
Wow.
building, which would be insane. I don't even want to know the permits that need to get figured out for that, but somebody's on it anyway. And then also a lot of the brickwork and things. There's some exposed areas of the original mansion on the inside of the building that's really cool. So this
Mhm.
good part of the historic side of things is in the works as well. But you can see that historic staircase in one of the renders.
That's exciting. I love when places like this that like go down to the studs, but when they're able to for that remodel, but when they're able to keep some of those historical elements, that's what's so exciting when you see stuff like this.
Yeah, it's kind of a combo of the historic McCormick Mansion and then Rockwell's vision of the of the rest of the spaces, which you can start to see, some of the feelings that you get when you
Mhm.
look at those pictures. Every room telling its own story. Um, and I know we haven't really talked about exactly what that is yet. I don't think it was really covered in the article, but there is a really Rockwell himself is a amateur magician,
Mhm.
fascinated by loves magic, loves magic. Yeah, we've taught him a few things when he's been here in town, and so he really did view this from a magician's frame of mind, which is really interesting. I One thing that, and this is just like, he was part of the designing the House of Blues. Have we talked about this?
No, I don't think we
No.
have. I didn't realize that Rockwell was involved in House of Blues.
He's done everything. Like,
Yeah.
if it's awesome, Rockwell Group probably made it. But anyway, I've had so many side conversations with David, and one of the interesting parallels that he brought up to me, and I didn't know this about the House of Blues, because at this point, you and I and our generation, we just kind of like, oh, it's a place where you see music, and
Yeah.
but its original, like, and I probably still is their mission. It's just I never kind of interpreted it this way. It was that, it was to take the touring bands like off the road and put them in a place that like celebrated their sound and made it a place where like a band would want to play. And then from the guest experience, you get to see your favorite band in a smaller venue as opposed to go seeing them at the United Center or whatever. So
Yeah.
like I'm like, oh, that's fascinating. And when I've talked to him, he's kind of had that same idea in his head because this is a place that's been designed with and by magicians for magicians. So these spaces are kind of thought through in a way that, how would a magician, what it's like, what does a magician need? And then intentional design to create spaces that'll be incredible for performance magic. And it kind of goes to the same thing as the House of Blues. It's just an amazing place where musicians want to perform because the sound is great and the backstage areas are great and all that stuff. And it's great for the guest experience. So it's kind of in the same world. That said, the our building, the entire place is a performance space. So
Well, I,
every inch of it.
the uh the image of that close-up room that
Mm.
was released is I man, it's got me chomping at the bit to get on that table.
There's a couple things to mention about that room. One, that room, funny enough, that render is not exactly correct. It is. It's exactly what that is, but we got rid of the back row, so it's even smaller.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so it's instead of whatever that is, it's about 32 seats at this point. And that room, I've been in it. I was just in it yesterday.
Mhm.
It's the raking on it is incredible. There won't be a bad seat anywhere in there. And yes, it's going to be your favorite room for sure. It's going to be a lot of people's favorite rooms. And that table, I haven't, I know it's coming, but I mean, that table is like, I'm told it can move, but I'm not sure it does. I think it's made out of stone. So,
Oh,
yeah.
well, that's
So,
exciting. I
yeah.
hope we get to hear more about the hand in the eye as we get closer and closer to the update. Maybe one of
Oh
these
yeah,
days
no,
we'll.
it's nice to have. We're gonna have a lot more. I mean, I
Yeah,
can tell you right now, like we're just things are moving so fast, and it was nice to hear some response from the community a little bit. A lot of people have reached out, and yeah, so all seems pretty positive. It's going to be a great thing for everybody.
that's exciting. Well, Nick, I'm going to throw it over to past Eric. We've got Myq Kaplan, who's a comedian, joining us this week to talk about writing comedy for magicians and creating shows with intention and writing towards a particular target. He was introduced to me actually, I opened for him years ago, but he was reintroduced to me by Ben Seidman. He's one of Ben Seidman's favorite comics. So it's a pretty interesting conversation about creativity. So looking to expand some of the people that we're bringing into the podcast this season, since
Sounds
this is
good.
this is season 7 that we're in now.
That's that makes no sense.
I know.
Yeah.
Nick, I
All
will
right.
talk to you later, buddy.
All right. Later.
Thanks as always to Nick for being on the show. I'm super excited to bring you more updates on the hand and the eye as Nick can reveal them. It is shaping up to be one heck of a place. Let's move on to the main event. Myq Kaplan is a nationally touring stand-up comedian with multiple albums and an upcoming YouTube special titled Reenie. He is a truly unique way of looking at humor, comedy writing, and show construction. Now, I get so many messages from listeners about writing comedy and making their show funny that I thought I would bring a truly funny comedian on the show to discuss comedy writing, creativity, and so much more. I caught up with Myq via a video chat, and now you get to join our conversation. Myq Kaplan, thanks so much for joining me here on the Penguin Magic podcast. Excited to have you. I got to I got to open for you many years ago, and then I was reintroduced to you through our mutual acquaintance, Ben Seidman. For our podcast listeners, Myq is not a magician. He's a fantastic comedian.
Thank you so much for having me and saying all that and reminding me of our meeting those years ago. It's you don't look a day older since then, and everything's the same. How do you do it? You're a wizard, and sincerely. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to chatting. I love Ben, and I'm happy that he connected us.
Oh, absolutely. So I want to start talking a little bit about an album you put out called AKA, which was the first time I saw you, and it had a profound impact on me because it was, and I promise podcast listeners that we will relate this to magic soon, but your show was a palindrome. Like the whole show was a palindrome. Can you describe a little bit about that to our listeners?
Sure. Thank you. I really appreciate that. The show that came to be called AKA, which is short for All Killing Aside. That was the original name. I brought that show to Edinburgh in 2018 and then recorded it in 2019 and released it in 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic at a time where we thought maybe having, killing front and center in the middle of the name, in May of 2020 won't be everyone's favorite. So I thought it was a fun thing to come up with. Oh, as an AKA, we'll call it AKA, the initials of All Killing Aside, which is itself a palindrome, much like the material of the show, which does sort of. So I've always. Not always, but for a while, I'd say my first hour special that I put out in about 2014 called Small, Dork, and Handsome was the first time that, like, before that, I had a couple albums that I would say were just like the best jokes that I had at the time, Like I worked for 7 years before I recorded my first album, and I was like, is basically, it's funny that musicians, bands will put out a best of album, 50 years into their career, and that makes a lot of sense, or whatever, 20, 30 years in. I feel like every comedian's first album is also a best of that comedian so far, like hopefully, not saving the good stuff. And so, but in the beginning, it was just like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall to see what sticks and be like, oh, here's what sticks. That could be the name of any comedian's first album. This stuck. I've got a lot of great names if anyone's out there looking for album names. I'm going to do a whole album full of album names, and I don't know what to call it. Maybe album names. And so the first 2 albums were just like that, where I was like, okay, I've got a bunch of stuff that I'm really happy with. I stand behind these jokes. The jokes weren't necessarily about anything in particular. They were about things in particular, but they weren't thematically connected or even like structurally formatted until I got to Small Dork and Handsome, where that hour was framed with time travel as sort of a main conceit or a topic that arose. And I realized, I would start jokes and then sort of go into digressions and off on tangents and, aim to eventually complete all the parentheses. And that's just sort of something that I naturally stumbled into, a style which I sometimes refer to as my mom on the phone. And and also me, like sometimes when I'm doing a show and I'm, in the moment and feeling it, and like the audience is going along on riffs and like a flow state is, there or adjacent, or at least, makes sense to think about it more than other times. And sometimes, during a show that I'm not, recording and releasing, I'll listen back later and be like, oh, I didn't finish everything. I didn't, I started something and it reminded me of something else and it brought me to a third thing. And, maybe every once in a while, somebody at the end of a show will be like, what about blank? And I'm like, you're right. I did forget about blank. But so cutting ahead to AKA the album you're asking about, that hour was one where as I was constructing it, I realized that the material that I had for it, like, first of all, it was the first album that I feel like really, so I'd been making these, hours of comedy that I was happy with all the jokes in, whether or not they were about things that I cared about, like just some things like, oh, this is a silly idea. Oh, this is a joke about a movie, some stuff about social justice that I cared about, some stuff about my personal life, but that wasn't my, my initial goal. My initial goal was just like, whatever's funny, and I'll try anything. And then a few years in between Small Dork and Handsome and AKA, I did an album called No Kidding, which was the first album that I was trying to thematically stick to, like a central topic, from which other ideas would sprout. But the main idea was not wanting children. And then AKA, the main idea about behind that album was basically I wanted to do an album all about love, compassion, and essentially not murdering. And so No Kidding was about not bringing anyone else into the world, and AKA was about not eliminating anyone who's in the world from it. And so a nice bookend for my my complete works. But so that's the, so I feel like here's I feel like I'm showing at what I'm telling and telling what I'm showing. In linguistics, which I studied in college, I took a class called semantics, and one of the classes, one of the topics in the class that we discussed is like, what is the definition of something, right? Like, and for a chair was the thing that we discussed in class. What is the meaning? What is the meaning of this chair? And like, if you speak English, if you live in our society, you have an idea. If somebody says chair, you might picture like you're in a swivel chair, right? You might picture a rocking chair. You might picture your basic, prototypical, like 4 legs and a back. You're like 4 legs and a back. That's also a dog, but no, a chair, and you might be like, okay, a chair is different than a stool. A stool could be similar, a couch, a love seat, there's all these things on the fringes, but like what makes a chair a chair? And in the class we discussed, it's basically 2 things. It's form and function. Like if it looks like a chair, it's probably a chair unless it's some kind of hologram or illusion. But if it looks like it, and if you can sit on it, very likely it's a chair. Unless it's too long, then it's a bench, or too high. It could be a high chair, but could be a stool, But if you have the optimal combination, the prototypical chair, you can sit on it and it looks basically chair-like. And it's not only physical things you can do that for. Even we discussed in the class the concept of climbing. And like climbing, what is the definition of climbing? Well, the form of it is, let's say if you're climbing a tree or climbing a mountain, it's like kind of going like, like this. If you're looking at me, just like imagine somebody climbing. You can climb up a mountain, you can climb down a mountain, you can climb up a tree, you can climb down a tree. That's the form of climbing. The function of climbing is to go up. If you say, because if the form is lacking, if you say stock prices climbed today, it can't be that they climbed down. Stock prices never climb down. So because it lacks the form, because it's metaphorical, it must have the function in order to be climbing. And so the function of climbing is to go up. The form of climbing is to maneuver, physically. So you have at least one of those, you got climbing. Cut to my comedy. I feel like for a show like AKA, I now like to have the function come first, the meaning, the spirit, like the heart of like, what is it about? And then the form will hopefully either follow or, adjacently, sort of like line up with it. And so as I was, for a few years, probably before we met and we did that show together, I think probably in around 2015 was like the time that the first seed was planted in my brain that I was like, I want to do a show about, kindness, love, psychedelics. It was on psychedelics that I did have the idea initially. I'm like, I think I could do a comedy show that's all about love. Classic psychedelic brain. and I did. I was like, and I started working on it in a way that was different than when I started doing comedy. And I was just throwing things at the wall. After a few years, after enough years, after probably like 10 to 15 years, I was like, hey, when I throw things at the wall, sometimes things stick. What if I aim at a specific wall? What if I throw a lot more things at one wall instead of just like things all over every wall? I'm like, what if I throw things at this kindness wall, this love wall, this concept wall? And I started doing that, and I started writing material. And then I found in the course of writing it, the thing that had, sort of been a common thread from hour to hour throughout, my doing of comedy was this opening and closing of parentheses, this, starting something and going off a long way and then returning to it. And I wrote a joke about it that my comedy was essentially like Inception, or structured like Inception. Like you start in one place, then you go deeper and then you go deeper and you're deeper. And eventually I'm like, we'll climb out. And so if you look at the track listings of AKA, you'll see that in the middle, like each track listing, I believe, is named like A, B, and C, like this, and that, this, that, and the other. And there are 17 tracks, and the very middle track, the very middle item of the very middle track is Inception. So I tell my Inception joke right in the middle of the show. And, so the beginning of the show is heading towards it, and the rest of the show is heading away from it. And then I did the best as I could to both name the tracks along with the concepts that sort of surround it, going outward and outward from that point. Like the first track mentions a bathroom. The last track also takes place in a bathroom. And so, like, I don't know if you want to have the purest experience, like stop listening to me right now and just listen to the album and then look at the track listings. But yeah, it became palindromic in that I realized like that's what I want to do. I want to start everything and I want to finish everything. And like, what is a finish but the opposite of a start, the mirror image, like palindromically. So that, I don't know if I answered your question, but that's how that came about.
I think it's fantastic. And I actually just pulled the album up over on one of my other monitors because I wanted to look at the track listing. I'm actually, as soon as we get off of this call, I'm going to go back and listen to it again. But one of the things that really spoke to me and that you said there was comedy is a lot about throwing stuff against a wall and seeing what sticks. And with AKA and your new special that's coming out soon, which we'll talk about a little bit later, now you're aiming for a specific wall. And I think that, I think one of the most common questions that this podcast gets is from magicians saying, how can I be funnier? And I think that the act of writing comedy for magic is extraordinarily difficult because there's this concept where the magic and the comedy can't exist in the same moment because it's there's a guy named David Acker who says you can't go aha while going ha ha. but it never occurred to me until you just said it that when you're trying to write for a specific wall for something to stick to, you could have a higher success rate. How do you go about writing for a specific wall these days? Even though you just talked about it extensively, but now I'm thinking about just like actually thinking about the act of being funnier.
Sure. I'm happy to answer that specifically and share more about what you just said. Number one, I'll say I can absolutely understand why writing, comedy for your magic act, to like coincide with it or accompany it or, infuse it or however you want it to be present in, with, or around the magic. You said it's difficult to do. And I think that's probably in part because writing comedy is difficult to do, or, writing comedy that is, to the highest standards or what you want it to be. Like, I don't know if you've seen like Ira Glass's quote about like the gap. And it's that when you start doing anything, anything artistically, at a certain point, you'll know where you want to get to, and you'll realize that you're not there. At a certain point, you might not even realize it. Like there's this thing of, first there's unconscious incompetence. People don't know that they're incompetent. Then there's conscious incompetence, where you're like, I'm incompetent, but at least I know it. And then hopefully you work your way to conscious competence and then perhaps unconscious competence. And I don't know what order they happen eventually. I'm not yet conscious of that. But so that's one way you make comedy happen is so this is all to say when people are starting out, Ira Glass pointed out that, when you know where you want to get to and you know that you're not there, and the only thing that gets you there is time and effort, or some combination of those. And like my friend Ramin Nazer, who is an incredible visual artist, among other things, he has this beautiful work of art, visual art, where it's basically like a huge chaotic conglomeration of images. And there's one guy who's throwing a clock at it, and the caption reads, "Just throw time at it until it's a thing." And that, I feel like that speaks to what we're talking about. And I mean, I think the one reason why it could be more difficult to create comedy for a specific magical context is like when I started writing comedy, like, as I said, truly, I was just filling notebooks with like any idea that I thought could be funny, interesting, meaningful, a poem, song lyrics, just like this, that, is that anything? Like, there's a book I recommend for any creator by a man named Verlin Klinkenborg, which is a fun name. I wish I came up with it. But that was probably Mr. and Mrs. Klinkenborg. Or they came up with Verlin, at least. But who knows? So Verlin Klinkenborg wrote a book called Several Short Sentences About Writing, I believe is the title. And basically he's, it is what it says. And one of the things that he shares in it is that any writer, any artist, any creator, what you're going to want to do, hopefully, theoretically, is notice things and then notice that you noticed it. Like, the classic comedian, did you ever notice? And then, what is it that you know? Oh, and, so many comedians are like, wow, look at this thing that is part of all of our lives that nobody had seen in this new way, hopefully, this new perspective on a universal right there thing. And so this is all to say, in the beginning, I was just like, notice this, notice that, notice everything, and just like throw it all at all the walls and be like, is anything? It's funny. Seinfeld wrote a book, a collection of like I think it's like all of his bits, like by decade, and it's called "Is This Something?" And because that's like, the question that a comedian might classically ask a friend, be like, is this something? Like I was thinking about this thing. And so it's called "Is This Something?" I also love there's also a book by, oh man, I'll come up with her name in a minute. She was on Saturday Night Live and she died. And she had another book called Bunny Bunny, and it's gonna happen. And she had cancer, and Gilda Radner. Okay.
Gilda Radner.
Yes.
As soon
everyone
as you
wins.
said cancer, I was like, oh, I know what it is.
Yeah. So Gilda Radner, she wrote a book called It's Always Something. So I love that Seinfeld's like, he said, is this anything? It's always something. And so as a young comedian, and if you're a magician who is new to writing jokes, I think just know that, I mean, the best comedians, like I heard Colin Quinn say once at like a keynote address at Montreal at the comedy festival there years ago, he said something like this. He was like, young comedians, like if you're only 5 years in, like just know that no one really knows what they're doing until about 10 years in. Nobody knows what their voice is. Nobody knows at all anything until about 10 years in. And if you've been doing it 10 years, it's actually 15, you know? And and so this is all to say, if you're starting out, I mean, I love writing comedy because I love writing comedy. I love, even before I was a comedian, even before I conceived of being a comedian, it was sometimes I would make my friends laugh. Sometimes I would say something and a person would laugh. And I'm like, ooh, what a joy. What a spark, you know? And so that, I guess my first piece of advice would be, I guess I have a lot of advice. I don't know the order, but if you want to write funny things or write funnier things, like just start writing things all the time. Start noticing things, start noticing what you're noticing. Like, don't even do it with a goal in mind. Like, if you have the specific magic wall in mind, that will limit you. You know, if you're like, I only want things to fit this, these parameters, then that constraint, I mean, maybe you'll come up with beautiful things within those constraints, but also in the beginning, you know, don't limit yourself. I mean, don't limit yourself unless you're like, I don't know what to do at all. Then, okay, limit yourself a little. And then, because sometimes great creativity can arise out of constraints, which I think I'll get to the answer to your question, which is, how do I aim at a specific wall? Which is, I just started. I realize, and part of it is this. I studied linguistics in college, and one of the things that I learned in linguistics, as I said previously, but this is a new thing, thing from before, take two, the sequel, a thing that I learned about linguistics is that the study of language, you know, when people study language in a linguistic framework, it's about describing how people speak. It's not about prescribing the way people should speak. We're not like grammar teachers. We're not like I before E, you know, like my first linguistics professor said, I don't care if you split infinitives, end sentences with prepositions, say ain't, spell things wrong, whatever you want. Like, if people say it, then it's valid. If it's the way that people naturally speak, that's what linguistics is concerned with. That's how I got into comedy as well. Descriptively as opposed to prescriptively. I wasn't like, I should be a comedian. I found myself on stage as a musician, and I, in between songs, would sometimes say things and people would laugh at them. And that felt good. And I was like, oh, can I recreate that? So that's something that I would say for anyone who wants to create comedy for any reason, magical or otherwise, is be descriptive about it. Don't think, what will an audience like? Don't think, what do I want it to be? Like, start with what you already have, like a gratitude journal, you know, like, what do you have so much? However long you've been alive, like, look back at that. Have you ever made a person laugh? What did you do to make that happen? Look at that. And so that's like, I'm bouncing back and forth from like the specific to the general, but in general, if you want to make people laugh, think about, have you ever made a person laugh? Even if it was by accident. If it was by accident, just claim it, and then it's not by accident. Like, Harry Shearer famously said, like, that people get into comedy to control for why people are laughing at them. So if anyone has ever laughed at you for any reason, you can use that. You can figure out, I mean, hopefully there's some translatable skills in becoming a magician, discovering who you are as a performer, who you are on stage, such that, yeah.
There absolutely is. And I think what's fascinating is I have conversations with creative magicians about creating magic all the time on this show and just in general. And a lot of what you are saying is the same thing that a magical creator would say, which is notice everything around you. Don't sit there and say, well, I need to create magic. Look at something and say to yourself, oh, well, I have this top on my desk that I'm always spinning. And then I'm noticing the top and say, well, what if I could spin it and it would rise up off the desk or something like that? And take it and say, how would I break the laws of physics with it? And you're saying the same thing about comedy. Notice everything and then notice why you're noticing it. And it's just it's it's a different way of approaching the things around you. But it starts at the same, just be inquisitive.
Absolutely. And if you can make that top never stop spinning, then you've got the end of Inception. So, yeah, of course, 100% that. And like the more you look at something, the more you'll see. The more you seek, the more you'll find. And so, I think the difference between like me in the beginning of doing comedy and me now is, in the beginning I didn't realize, like, I thought I was like looking at the world as it is. Like, my girlfriend shared with me this idea that we see the world not as it is, but as we are. And like, but we come into the world, and a lot of, people in Western civilization, at least in our society, or at least me, I'll say me, but I feel like a lot of us were taught things as though they are, that they are gospel, and then later they're like, actually, physics doesn't work like that, and actually history isn't exactly as pat as that. Like, everything that we learn, they're like, oh, you can zoom in further. Like if you're making a map of a country, you're like, well, what's the perimeter of the country? Well, it depends. Are you going by miles? Are you going by feet? Are you going by inches? Like, you'll get a different number each way that you do it. Like, sometimes markedly different, depending if there's like lots of nooks and crannies and, edges and turns and stuff. Like, it could become like a Mandelbrot set kind of situation. Like, you can keep zooming in and zooming in and zooming in. But in the beginning, I thought I was trying to, like, I wasn't sure. I think about this sometimes. Like, are we discovering it or are we creating it? And I think in some sense, we are, like, creating means curating. Creating means discovering and reframing, because, like, we didn't create the language that we're using. We didn't create our vocal cords. We didn't create our physical bodies. For the most part, you didn't create anything that you use in your magic act. I didn't create this microphone. Even if you build something, you didn't create the tree that gave you the wood that you chopped up and sawed together. Whatever you're doing, like, if you go back far enough, like, we didn't create ourselves. We came, as Alan Watts says, not into the world, but out of it. And like, it's all been here since, as some Buddhists say, since beginningless time. But so we're like zooming in right now, and we're like, okay, are we discovering or are we creating? And I think some jokes are about finding connections between things that exist in the world, and some jokes are more, or some songs or some tricks are probably more about creating something that's seemingly more new, or that has not ever been before, relatively speaking. And so I think that the way that I used to be, I was like, okay, what's out there that I can find? And I would look for things, and then I would find them. Like, oh, I guess that's how you find things, is you look for them. But I didn't even realize, like, what if I started looking, both more inward and realizing that, like, my framing, like, my perspective is like impactful in how I'm seeing what is going on, quote unquote, outside of me. Like, Alan Watts also says, there's no such thing as just an organism, like, devoid of an environment. We're all some combination of organism environment. We live symbiotically. Like, you can't walk without the ground, We, like, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, calls it interbeing, like, a flower can't exist without dirt, without water, without sunlight. We can't exist without oxygen, without our parents, without food, etc. You eat your parents, I assume. And and so this is all to say, I now realize that, oh, if I keep, like, for the first topic I wanted to make an hour of comedy about, I realized I was like being descriptive about it. I'm like, I am thinking a lot about not wanting children, because I was in a relationship with a woman who wanted children, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, oh, that was a very fruitful, like, a very fertile ground, so to speak. I was like, oh, wow, I'm giving birth to a lot of jokes about not wanting anyone to give birth in my life. And I was like, oh, and now so it was kind of both. It's kind of like nature and nurture combined. I was like, oh, naturally, I'm thinking about these things, and now I'm going to nurture these ideas by heading in that direction. And then I was like, oh, what if I could do that? Like, even if I don't have an idea about what is a show about kindness, what is a show about love, what does that mean? Like, well, if I just start writing, if I just start thinking, if I just start talking about it, it's sort of like the way that, if you do the Wonder Woman pose, arms akimbo on your hips, then that's a power pose that will psychologically impact you. If you smile, your brain gets tricked. You're like, oh, I guess we're happy. We're smiling. We must be happy. So like sometimes the function follows the form, like with respect to our physical bodies. And so sometimes function follows the form. If the form of creating a comedy show or a joke or anything is writing, let me just start writing. I'll start writing and I'm going to aim at that wall. I'm like, what is that wall? Is that wall magic? Is that wall my relationship? Is that wall kindness? Is that wall psychedelics? Is that wall veganism? Is that wall like whatever is going on inside me at this very moment? Start writing and see what arises, because, we can sometimes surprise ourselves and, maybe it will lead you off in a different direction and you end up writing something that you hadn't planned, or maybe then you can try to steer yourself back or be like, well, my original plan was to be a musician. I was like, I'm going to be a singer-songwriter. And then, I went out and did that and I found myself steering off towards comedy and I was like, I guess I'm a comedian, And I'm still a musician. I still love making music and writing songs. But, for my career, I am spending the majority of my creative energy writing jokes and shaping shows and, seeing it. And I do think that it's all like art. Rumi, the mystic, the Sufi mystic poet. I never know this quote exactly, but it's something like, we are all flutes that the universe plays its music through. And like everyone's like a different shaped flute. Like the universe is like flowing through everyone. And sometimes the music comes out as music. Sometimes it comes out as comedy. Sometimes it comes out as magic. Sometimes it comes out as science. Sometimes it comes out as whatever form, you get natured and nurtured into. And so that's a thing that anyone can do. Is figure out, who they are by what is happening. Just be like, what is happening? Who am I? Like, I read this book, and then I'll stop talking in a second. This book called Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg earlier this year. And she is basically does writing as a meditative practice. And, has written many books that all began as just this writing for writing's sake, writing for, self-discovery. And she recommended doing morning pages, like writing physically and asking the question, I believe, who am I? And so sometimes I do that. I'm just like, who am I? Who am I today? Who am I right now? Like, who am I, in this moment? What am I thinking about? What is important to me? What is concerning me? And like from there, there's just so many paths that can be taken. And so, yeah, if you start off aiming nowhere, just aim everywhere, just be like, what's here? And then eventually, if you want to, then you can start just write long enough, write stream of consciousness, write free form about a topic and see where it takes you. And hopefully it'll take you somewhere that, whether it's where you wanted to go initially or not, it'll be somewhere that you're happy to have landed.
I think that this idea of approaching the creation of humor in your, whether it's creating comedy for like a comedy show, or trying to add jokes or laughs into a magic show or some other type of allied art, I think one of the things that often frustrates people is trying to make something fit into a way they want. And it is this, I think you have this really lovely idea of, you just need to start doing something, and you may be aiming for something, but you also have to let yourself just be aware that you might not, whatever you start with might not get to where you want it to, because you are discovering as much as you are creating. And so you might end up not where you want to go, but at least you are actually in the act of creation. And it's repeating that act of creativity that will get you closer to being able to identify if something belongs where you want it to be.
Oh, yeah. I have two things to say, and I think these will be as contained as I can. One is about Calvin and Hobbes, and one is about Christopher Titus. So Calvin and Hobbes, one of my favorite comic strips of all time, brilliant and beautiful. There is just, I'm going to describe a Calvin and Hobbes strip that I love that I think speaks to what we're talking about. Calvin is walking and he trips and he falls on his butt and then he gets up and he says, ta-da! And like, I feel like that describes comedy in like the nutshelliest of nutshells. Like, there's so many different ways to do comedy. There's so many different ways to create art, but so much comedy is like if I'm to, I'm like, oh, wow. I just realized in the moment, I do this. I have a newsletter where this year I've been every week describing a joke that I love or a piece of, comedic art that I love, and like the profound, like sort of connotations that can like ripple out from just the text of what seems might be on the surface just a silly joke, but like could have like deeper like spiritual implications at points. And I feel like I just had the idea to do that about that Calvin and Hobbes strip because it's just so perfect. It's like, I imagine that Calvin, the character Calvin, before he falls on his butt, wasn't planning to fall on his butt. He wasn't like, hey, everyone, come see me do the fall on my butt show. But he accidentally fell on his butt, and then instead of being like, "Wah, I fell on my butt," he gets up and he says, "Ta-da!" I don't even know if there's anybody else there. I think he's the only one in the thing, but it's just such a, like I'm there, I'm the audience, like the audience is the audience. I feel like that's like a perfect, encapsulation of the way that comedy can work. And another way that comedy can work is, I was reminded recently, Christopher Titus is an incredible comedian and storyteller who I got to open for about 20 years ago. And we sort of like re-met on Threads. Like we're both active on there and, interact with each other's, jokes and posts and things. He is, I feel like an incredible, creative and moral presence in the world. But his creativity is what will address now, because 20 years ago-ish, he shared with me his process for writing, so this will be hopefully actionable for magicians in the same way that's actionable for storytelling comedians. Just insert magician for storyteller here. He says when he is writing a story, or when he was, crafting, like, what is the story? How will the story manifest on stage? He has an idea of the story that he wants to tell. Like, I assume a magician might have in mind the trick that they want to like infuse with jokes or comedy or what have you. He says that he writes down every line of the story. He's like, this is the story, funny or not, every line of detail about the story. And hopefully it has like, a funny punchline, a point, something, some end point that he's striving to get to. But along the way, every line he takes as a writing exercise as like a setup for a punchline. He's like, what if every factual piece of information in the story is the setup for a joke? And then he writes as many jokes as he can, like, for each one, like come up with a lot of like, what could the joke for this one be? What could the joke for this one be? And so perhaps there could be, like, if you have a trick that you like works, but you like, I want to be funny during it. Well, then what are the things that are important for you to say? What are the, the beats of the magic trick, or illusion, Michael, of course. I'm sure I'm the only person to ever reference that scene to a magician. But take everything that you say, certainly everything that you have to say. If like you have to say something to set up the trick and it's not a funny thing, well then, can there be a funny thing that like follows it? Can that thing, in addition to being the functional piece that it is, can it also be the setup to like an ornamentation, that you can adorn it with, like, oh, look at this, like, here, behold, look into my eyes. Is that what magicians do? Behold, look into my eyes. They're up here, not down here. That kind of thing.
You perfectly described Ben Seidman's show.
Nailed it. And so, yeah, so I think that, obviously it's so interesting. Like, the work of doing it is the thing that is, takes time and effort. And, ideally as a comedian, you're like, every idea that you come up with, you'll want to try on stage many times. So like it's a time intensive process. It's sort of like I'm like, here's the prescription, and like now you got to take the medicine for a year, or for as long as it takes to churn out the results of the process. But I do think, when we said at the beginning, you mentioned like it's sometimes difficult to create comedy for magic. And I said, yes, and it's difficult to create comedy. Like, let me go back up and say, it's not difficult to create it. It's difficult to create it well. It's difficult to create the best version of what you want it to do. But the fact is that it's simple to create it. Just start creating it. If you can write, start writing. If you want to talk, start talking. Like, record yourself in whatever form you can, and then go back and pan for gold within your own creations. Because, I mean, it's such a really weird, beautiful, magical thing that, like, when I sit down to write each day, like in the morning, I'll write for an ideally like at least 10 minutes of just free, like not trying to create anything specific at all. Just like, who am I? Where am I? How am I? What am I? Like, what am I grateful for? What is on my mind? And then sometimes, like so frequently, new things arise that I never thought before. And it is like, it's an incredible, like, just yesterday, I was somewhere and somebody mentioned llamas, and I was like, oh, I never thought about how, like, I imagine, like, if that creature was going to give birth, maybe they would take a class, llamas, lamas, and I just never thought about llamas, lamas until yesterday, and now everyone listening will think about it for the rest of their lives, and that's a beautiful, magical thing. Or if you forget about it, that's cool too, the magic of forgetting. So, yeah, those are some thoughts I have.
No, it's I really like what you said there about Titus's process, because that is actionable for magicians. And then where the real skill comes in is actually identifying where you should put funny things.
Yes.
Rather than because you can ornament everything you say, every action you do, you can add something to it. But at what point are you taking away from the magic? Actually, I had somebody reach out to me, and they wanted me to watch their set that they did at a comedy open mic and give them advice on how to make it funny or funnier. And the interesting thing was, the advice was not here's how to be funny. It is, you have been introduced as a magician, and it is not until 6 minutes into an 8-minute set that we actually see a magic trick. And so what you've done is you've cleverly written a comedy set, regardless of whether or not it's funny. You've written a comedy set, and the real magic is you made the magician disappear. And so if you want to be a comedy magician, you need to identify, like, using these types of techniques that you've just described, but then figure out where it's appropriate for it to be and where it's not, because you're trying to serve two different things.
Absolutely. That's a great point. That's making a magician disappear. Delightful. Chef's kiss, magician's kiss.
Well, you described the same thing in your music, where you were like, hey, I want to be a singer-songwriter, but you find yourself continuing to gravitate toward these things that are funny. And now you've made the singer-songwriter disappear and produced a comedian from beneath a bedsheet.
Oh, absolutely. And it would be really weird if, like, somebody was like, and now please welcome musician Myq Kaplan, and I came out and just told jokes the whole time. Be like, oh yeah, I'm a musician, but I'm not doing that tonight. It's weird that they said it. Anyway, but the thing that I think I had it. I almost made it disappear. It's coming. It's gonna okay. You, the guy at the show, might be gone. But yeah, got it. Boom. Okay, you can edit all that out, make that disappear. Editors are magic. The thing that you reminded me of is in discussing, like, how full of, if you have a magic set that's too full, like, that's more full of comedy, such that it shuts out all of the magic, like there was this book I read as a kid, and I forget the name of it, but it was just a kid's book, and it was about a kid who had a plant babysitting service. And when people went on vacation, he was like, bring your plants over, I'll babysit your plants. And then he had a dream that they just kept growing and growing, and like they filled the house, and eventually like the house walls just busted down. And we're like, well, this isn't even a house anymore. It's just like a house-shaped plant conglomeration. And so it's like, okay, so that, but the walls of the house are magic and the plants are jokes. So if you want to be a magician, you probably don't want all of the magic to leave your set and be replaced with comedy. Then you're a comedian. Wonderful magic trick. You've turned from a magician to a comedian. That's incredible. You're a meta magician. A mathematician? No, a meta magician. And this is all to say, in my life with my girlfriend Rini, she coined this term for these terms for the processes by which I create, like the comedy that I create and the way that I do it, is when I'm like at the beginning of a creative process. Like, let's say I just filmed a special and I'm working on the next one. And usually now these are happening sort of concurrently. But let's say I finish one, I'm starting another. When I'm starting, she calls it and I also now call it, because I like it, the blooming phase. The blooming phase of creation. Just like planting seeds, watering everywhere, the throwing everything as many places as you want, and just like, oh, growing and growing and growing, like, these plants out of control until eventually they're so massive. I'm like, there's enough here for, the hour. And then what is the hour? Like, or what is the bit? Or how does the trick work? Like with these new things in it, like you don't want to be too chock full, too crammed. And so then when the final stage of the creative process of the two, is she calls the pruning phase. And that means, taking some things out, maybe saving them for another time. If you're like, oh, this will be good, but not for here. And so that would be in this process, if you do the Christopher Titus method of, taking your entire, the monologue part of your magic act, or even, the physicality as well, just everything that you do that can be a setup for a punchline. Once you have all of those punchlines, once you have all of the fun that can be infused into it, then be like, what should it be? Like, what is the ultimate, final form? What is the shape that I want this to be? Because, if you set something up magically, but then you have like too long a time in between, the setup and the magical punchline, the prestige. I know one term. I saw one movie with that name. And, but I imagine, like, just like in a joke, if the setup is too far from the punchline, like Seinfeld famously likens it to getting the audience to leap off a cliff. And he's like, if the punchline is too far, like, be it conceptually or potentially chronologically, then the audience won't get there. But if it's too close, it's not exciting. So it's got to be the exact right distance. My analogy, I like even more. Look, who am I to give notes to Seinfeld? But my version that I like even better is that the comedian and the audience are playing catch. And, I want to throw, a frisbee, a football, whatever thing I'm hurling. I want the audience to, I don't want to throw it right to them. I want them to have to move a little bit. I want them to be engaged. I don't want to throw it too far so they don't get it, but I don't want it to not get to them, and I don't want it to be so easy that they can just see it coming right at them. I want them to be like, oh, I got it. Okay. Oh, I'm gonna. And so it's more exciting. And so, but if it's too far, then they might not make it. So I can imagine a similar thing in magic. If you set up the beginning of a trick and then, an hour later, you're like, is this your card? I'm like, you've been doing doves for 45 minutes. I mean, which is to say, obviously, like, there are some magic tricks that do, like a comedy show might have an incredible callback that you didn't even expect happening, an hour after the show began and you thought the trick was over, of course. But probably like on the micro level within each thing, like there's the question of like, what will best serve this piece and what will best serve the whole.
So, minor tangent, every time someone brings up dove magic, I have to point out that dove magic is my favorite kind of magic. And it's not because I think it's particularly beautiful or it's particularly fooling, or I'm for or against using animals on stage in magic. It is because the moment you see a dove produced, you instantly know that there is someone standing on stage in front of you with 10 more birds in their pants. And that is a deeply wonderful image in my head. I do want to, you brought up Rini, your partner, but that is also your new special that you are coming out with soon. Can you tell us a little bit about where people can see the special and what they need to know about it?
Of course. I mean, I guess the only thing you need to know about it is that it exists, and it will be, depending when you're listening to this, November 19th, 2025. Rini the special debuts on YouTube. It'll be on YouTube just recently introduced collaboration, like they do on Instagram now. So Blonde Medicine is the production company, and so it will be on their YouTube channel, and my YouTube channel will be collaborating with it. So theoretically, if you follow either of us, I recommend following both of us, Blonde Medicine and Myq Kaplan, spelled the weird way that you can see it right there, if you're looking at it. Right now, so November 19th, 2025 is when it debuts, but even as we speak, anytime, if it's before then, you can go and find it.
I'll put a link in the show notes so that people can go, if they're interested at all, they can go there and click the bell to remind them when it comes out.
Incredible. I appreciate it. Yeah. Every bit, it's sort of like pre-ordering a book, every advance noticing helps the algorithm and also helps you get to remember to see it. And even if, look, I know it's possible that not everyone in the universe will watch the special immediately. But I think that, so even if I can only assume that everyone here is going to, but just in case, if you're like, I got something else going on that night, and you're like, oh, I'll watch it later, but every little bit helps. So thank you for considering clicking and liking and, doing all the things. But yeah, Rini, the special, will be on YouTube. It's there right now in some, pre-form. And the reason it's called Rini is because it is a show that I created with Rini, the person who is my partner, my girlfriend of the past between 9 and 10 years. And we created the show together collaboratively. It is, a romantic collaboration that is being presented as a creative collaboration. It's a creative collaboration about our romantic collaboration. It's about our relationship. There's a lot of other things in it as well, but it's we made it together over the past 5 to 7-ish years, depending, maybe the past 9-ish years. As long as we've been together, I feel like this thing has been blooming, and then we eventually got it to the pruning stage, and it's there, and we're super excited about it and proud of it and happy with it. And so yeah, I love it. It's about the person I love. And so if you've ever loved a person or a thing, or if you've heard of love, I think this could be the show for you.
Well, I'm super excited. I'm going to click the bell to remind myself about it. And you're on tour right now. People can go to MyqKaplan.com. That's MyqKaplan.com. Looks like you're going to be here in Columbus, Ohio on the December 20th at the Attic Comedy Club. Looking forward to maybe I'll have to come out and check that out. But all your tour dates are up there, and everyone should go listen to your albums on Spotify and Bandcamp and all the different places. And Myq, thanks for stopping by the show to talk to us about comedy and creativity.
Thank you so much for having me, Eric. It was a great pleasure.
Thanks so much to Myq for being on the show, and thanks to you for listening. There is a link in the show description below so you can check out Myq's new special when it drops. Special thanks to Ben Seidman for reintroducing me to Myq and suggesting him for being on the show. As always, we're a weekly podcast, so be sure to like and subscribe, as well as share your favorite episodes on the social media platform that you are searching for Raspberry Pi projects on. If you wanted to reach out to me about anything on this week's show, you'll have to cast a video to the Plex server that took me way too long to set up. I'm finally doing it. I'm finally sitting down and actually plowing through the myriad of Raspberry Pi projects I have to automate my house. For those of you in the know, SSH can absolutely take a long walk off a short Ethernet cable. But if programming credit card sized computers isn't your cup of tea, you can always hit me up on Instagram at Eric Tate. That's at ERIKTAIT. From me and everyone else here at the P3 Magic Studios, practice, perform.